What this case shows is that the person radicalizing your son, your brother, your friend may not be a stranger. It may be their best friend right here in town. And your brother, your son, your relative could be talking to Avni Noor in Syria, who is providing inspiration and ideas for how to get to Syria.
That is Andrew Lugar. He is the U.S. Attorney of Minnesota, explaining the arrests of 6 individuals charged with plotting to join ISIS. For more on the radicalization here at home and the recruitment of U.S. citizens and immigrants, as well as the Iranian nuclear deal, we are joined by Florida Representative and a member of the House Foreign Relations Committee, Congressman Ron DeSantis. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time out. Let's start talking about this peer-to-peer recruitment. This seems to be a new phenomenon. A lot of these Somali immigrants, it seems to have run through the Somali community. There's another story about a 23-year-old who trained in Syria, and the imam sent him back and said, go carry out your jihad there in the United States.
Well, I know.
What do we do here?
We actually, in Florida, we had the first American suicide bomber in Syria was from South Florida, and he went to Syria, he did terrorist training, he came back to South Florida unimpeded, government didn't have any information on what he was doing, and then he went back and conducted a suicide attack. And that's concerning because these are people that we should be monitoring. The Somali situation in Minnesota, this is a whole community. They have funneled multiple people over to ISIS in the Middle East, and they're waging jihad, and this individual obviously came back. Many of them are still in the fight. So you seem to have a situation which is really toxic brew of jihadism. So you're taking people who are already predisposed to that and then just giving them a platform to go wage jihad, or you're taking people and actually radicalizing them because they're in this community where that is something that is being done.
What is fueling all of this? I mean, why are these young people particularly drawn to it? Whether it's the guy in France who was going to blow up the churches and shot himself and was captured by authorities, or these 6 individuals. What's driving them in the midst of civil Western societies to want to go out and give their lives in this cause?
Well, I think the difference between what we see now with ISIS and maybe what we saw with Al-Qaeda in the 90s is with the internet, with social media, if you're somebody who is disposed to want to accept kind of the jihadist worldview, that can be put right in front of you. And it's attractive for some people in a way that I think would have been much more difficult to imagine in, say, the mid-1990s. Not that there weren't people being radicalized, but I just think the pool of people who are now exposed to this is so much greater. And I think that's why you're seeing more people end up going in that direction.
Yeah. I want to talk for a moment about this Iranian deal. We've been seeing, of course, this play out over many days. In June, there will be a final pact, meat on the bones, if you will, of this primary agreement that everybody's already seeming to circle around. Congress has some oversight. They can vote the deal up or down when it comes out in June. Is that sufficient in your mind?
Well, here's the thing. We don't even know if there's a framework. We have not been even given the framework.
Nothing more than what we've seen in the press.
Exactly. And we're told maybe it's locked away somewhere, classified. We need to, we're the representatives of the American people, we need to at least see this framework. So we don't even know if there's a legitimate framework, if there was a meeting of minds on the framework, and who knows what's going to happen, whether there's a final signed deal. I'm skeptical that there will even be a signed deal. I think what you'll end up seeing is the president saying, oh, we've kind of reached an understanding, and kind of do that. That way, from his judgment, Congress won't even be in a position to pass judgment on the agreement. And it goes right back to Tom Cotton's letter, because he made the point, said, look, this is not going to be binding if Congress doesn't approve it. The next president could change it. So that very well may be where we're going. I mean, I think that what you want is, if you're going to bind the country internationally, that either needs to be approved in the Senate with 2/3 as a treaty, or it's got to just be a normal law of the land, go through both houses and sign. If he's not doing that, then to me, yes, he can conduct himself consistent with those promises, but that is not going to be binding for our country going forward.
The Ayatollah wants the sanctions lifted tomorrow. The moment after they agree to a deal, they want the sanctions lifted. one of the biggest problems is this doesn't seem to be tied to those 4 Americans that are sitting in an Iranian jail right now, a pastor, a Marine, a contractor. What do we do here? Should we be making a deal with Iran when you can't even send inspectors in? Inspectors tried to get into a military facility. They were turned away.
No, absolutely. And it's really less than a deal than a list of concessions, because as you say, we're not talking about the Americans who are detained. We know Iran is still the leading state sponsor of terrorism. That's not a part of the negotiations at all. We see what they're doing to foment unrest in Yemen. We know they're going to send weapons to the Houthis, and that is if that's a major international incident. We're like, oh, that's not going to be a part of the nuclear negotiation. So how would you trust a country who you see is such a destructive force throughout the world?
Yeah, well, we've got warships in place in Yemen. Now, they say, the White House is saying, the Pentagon is saying, this is just to make sure that the lanes remain open here. What do you think's going on there with those warships?
Well, look, I think that those warships need to be there. I think you are going to see Iran try to provide more arms to the Houthis.
To the Houthi rebels.
They want Yemen to be another Shiite Iranian sphere of influence. I mean, if you notice, they're the leading patron of the Gaza in the Gaza Strip for Hamas. They're the leading patron of Lebanese Hezbollah. They're the leading patron of Assad in Syria. Unfortunately, they're taking over more and more parts of Iraq with the Shiite militias. And then Yemen, I mean, they could emerge from the Obama presidency as by far the dominant power in the Middle East.
The administration says, look, you can't just keep sending troops to the Middle East. We have to work with the allies in the region, and we have to diplomatically engage even these long-term enemies. You would say what?
Well, look, I mean, we were in a position of strength. The sanctions regime was hurting Iran. It was hurting their economy. It was weakening the regime. They desperately wanted that relief.
Right.
In the House, what we did 18 months ago, we saw that and we said, this is a rogue regime. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to increase the sanctions and tighten it even more so that they come begging for us so that we'll accept their concessions. Instead, what the president did was he did sanctions relief unilaterally, thinking here's a gesture of good faith and that the mullahs will then return the favor. But that is not the way they think, and that is not the way they're constructed. And so they pocket the concessions, and now they're getting away with really a disarmament by us.
Speaking of sanctions and embargoes, I want to talk about Cuba for a moment. The Pope just announced he's going to go to Cuba before he comes to the United States in September. There is no doubt he will very likely raise that issue when he's here before a joint session of Congress, having just come back from Cuba. He will make the plea. His predecessors have as well. This embargo needs to be lifted. But now he was kind of the engineer. He was the one who's facilitated these talks, so there's a personal stake in it as well. What do you say?
Well, look, we know what happens with other countries that trade with Cuba. It goes to the Cuban military and the Cuban regime. And so unless there's something that changes, which would show me that actually it would benefit the Cuban people who've been oppressed for 50 years, I'm not interested, because I think what we're doing is we're increasing power of the Castro dictatorship. And these guys are getting old. I mean, I would like to see a transition to a more representative form of government, but if you're strengthening them in power, I think it's going to make it easier for them to hand off power to another strongman. So that's my concern with it. I would love to change the policy if it benefited the people in Cuba who are actually fighting for freedom.
Mm-hmm. I want to play something for you. This is President Obama. He was talking to Chris Matthews about his foreign policy. Listen.
I remind people that there actually is probably less war and less violence around the world today than there might have been 30, 40 years ago.
Your reaction?
Well, let's look back at when this president came office. Now, he got a Nobel Peace Prize, right? It's just basically for being elected, I guess. Look at what the world looks like since he took office. The Middle East has gone south. Iraq is in way worse shape. Libya is a haven for terrorists. Syria is just a total catastrophe. Yemen. And then even the people who are allies like Israel, we have a worse relationship with Israel. And Egypt, General Sisi trying to do the right thing. The administration still does not embrace what he's trying to do. So the idea that somehow things were worse 20 or 30 years ago, I just don't think that washes. And I think the American people look at the news they see on their TV sets and they see all the unrest, and I think that they just shake their head.
I want to jump around to a couple of quick issues before I let you go. You are in the reserves, we should tell people. Served in the Navy, you were a prosecutor for a while, and you're still in the reserves. There's a story about this Navy chaplain, this chaplain Motter, who in a private session with soldiers, cautioned against premarital sex, I guess said that gay marriage is not a good idea, coming from his personal convictions, his religious prerogative. He has been basically relieved of duty, 19-year veteran, a decorated man, and it has had a chilling effect on the chaplaincy. What should be done here? What should Congress be doing?
Well, look, we need to be upholding the First Amendment, and that means the free exercise of religion. You have Orthodox doctrine in the Catholic faith or in the Protestant faith. The idea that all of a sudden that's not going to be something that could even be discussed in those settings, I think is troubling, and that's not how the Chaplain Corps was working when I was on active duty, and I know a lot of members of Congress are concerned about it.
What about women in the military? There was a big push in the last few years. Leon Panetta announced it before he left at the Pentagon, that women will be moved into these elite fighting forces. Well, it turns out in the infantry officer course that the Marines offer, 29 women tried to get through the course. 0 were successful in making it through. Should the standards be lowered to achieve this goal of allowing women into these special forces, and what might be the result?
No, look, the standards are the highest standards in those units, and they have to remain the highest standards. And women have done a great job in a lot of areas, but you can't change the standard. I mean, for example, we have female fighter pilots. They don't have lower standards. They have to meet the same standards. And I think certainly when you start talking about Army Special Forces, when you start talking about these elite Marine Corps units, Navy SEALs, the standards have got to remain high.
Yeah, and you can't have a person in there. What my thought is, you put a woman in the midst of those Navy SEALs, and I know you know them, I know some of these guys too, their first instinct is going to be to protect that woman, it seems to me, no matter what, no matter what the situation is. It does create a dynamic that is very different from what they're dealing with now.
Well, and the thing is look, when you talk about standards, I mean, most men who do the Navy, try to do the Navy SEALs, they don't even come close. Exactly. Right. So you just, when you put anybody in there, male or female, who wasn't able to meet the standards, that is just totally verboten in that type of elite unit, because they need to depend on everybody with their lives.
Congressman DeSantis, thanks so much
for having me.
We'll have you back.